I would like to call this special council meeting of the Town of Lincoln to order. I would like to announce for those watching this meeting on your YouTube channel that normally council would be sitting around the horseshoe. However, under the circumstances with regards to the COVID-19 recommendations by Public Health, we're changing the seating arrangement here and putting their recommendations into place. So everyone from council that is present today is sitting out in the gallery. I'll be calling the roll in a few moments so that you know who is here. As I look around, I think we're complying quite well with the social distancing. Thank you very much, councillors, for making your way here today at this a time a little bit out of the ordinary. We do have important business to conduct. And I appreciate the town's efforts to practice the social distancing arrangements by closing the town facilities to the public and having the community watch the council meeting from home. These are unprecedented times. There is just no other word that really describes where we're at right now. However, council is committed to providing timely and accurate information to our residents, as well as keeping our organization operating effectively. And I want to thank our town staff for their continued professionalism, providing their sound and calm leadership during this time. At this time, I'll call the roll call of those councillors who are present in the gallery. From Ward 1, Councillor Diane Majima, Councillor Greg Reimer from Ward 4. We have Councillor Tony Brunet from Ward 2, Councillor Mike Mikulik from Ward 3. We have Councillor Lynn Timmers from Ward 4. We have Councillor Adam Russell from Ward 1. And we have Councillor John Pachariva and Deputy Mayor from Ward 2. And also on the phone, we have Councillor McPherson. Councillors, are there any declarations of interest? There being none, we move on to item 4, and we have 2 items to be considered at this special meeting of council. It has been requested that item 5.1, a bylaw 2020-13, a bylaw to amend the procedure bylaw of 2019-121, which provides the rules of order of council and its committees to be considered immediately after item 4.1 and be considered as item 4.2. Also, in order for this item to be considered immediately after 4.1 on the agenda, we are required to waive the procedural rules and require a 2/3 vote. So at this time, I request all those to consider that item. All of those in favor, would you please raise your hands? There are none opposed. The motion is carried. Now, item 5.1 will now be considered as item 4.2. We will now consider item 4.1, which is a report LS-04-20, procedural bylaw update for electronic meeting participation. At this time, those who wish to speak will raise their hands, and one at a time, I will call your name so that you may speak at the podium, and I'll keep a speaker's list so that I keep everyone in order. Please note, when you come up to the podium, the clerk she'll manage the microphone so that you don't need to touch it. She'll do it remotely so you don't have to touch it. So, are there any questions from council? All right, there being none, Madam Clerk. I have a motion moved by Councillor Russell and seconded by Councillor Mikulik that given the extenuating circumstances of the COVID-19 novel coronavirus, that Town of Lincoln Council waive the notice requirements for amendments to the Town of Lincoln's procedural bylaw 2019-121 as amended. That the amendments to Lincoln's procedural bylaw 2019-121 as amended, as outlined in Appendix A to Report LS-04-20, to facilitate electronic participation during the COVID-19 novel coronavirus pandemic, be approved, and that the necessary bylaw be presented immediately to Council for consideration. Are there any questions to this motion? There being none, your pleasure on the motion. All of those in favor? There are none opposed. The motion is carried. Madam Clerk, I believe that we are going to sign this bylaw immediately. Okay. All right, I have a motion, Councillor, moved by Councillor Brunet and seconded by Councillor Timmers, that leave be given to approve the following bylaw. 2020-13, a bylaw to amend bylaw 2019-121, a bylaw to provide for the rules of order of council and its committees procedural bylaw. Your pleasure on the motion. Those in favor? Hands up. There are none opposed. The motion is carried. Thank you. If you just give the clerk and I a couple of minutes, we'll sign and seal it, and then we can move on. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you watching, this action that we have just taken now allows Councillor McPherson, who is on the phone and who is in self-isolation, to participate in the meeting. We will now consider item 4.2, bylaw 2020-13. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not. LS 03-20. The delegated authority requirements during COVID-19 novel coronavirus pandemic. And Mr. CAO, would you have a few comments at this time, please?
Through you, Madam Mayor, and to all members of council that are here this evening and listening in. So what you have before you is a report with respect to delegated authority requirements. Just a few comments. I hope everyone's had a chance to read the report. We did get it to you as early as possible after significant legal review, as well as in collaboration with our partners across Niagara region. I do want to highlight for council that a number of municipalities have brought forward such reports requiring delegated authority, and we are doing the same here. I feel like I keep saying we're in unprecedented times. I don't think any of us have ever been through something like this, nor do I think any of us, when we get to the end of this, want to see this come back in any fashion. It is a global pandemic. It's something that I think is testing all of our systems. Just for your background, and I know many of you know that your senior leadership team, our senior leadership team, has been meeting 7 days a week, almost 24/7, in terms of either virtually or in attendance, from meetings at 7 in the morning to meetings at 7 at night, to the EOC coming together midday. This delegated authority bylaw is really very specific in its nature, and you'll see both in the alternatives for consideration and throughout the report what really this sort of declaration allows us to do. It is about continuity of operations. I do want to address any concerns or any fears that any member of council may have in that this report in any way provides delegated authority post the pandemic timeframe. This is strictly for the purposes of the pandemic, and there is still a reporting structure back to members of council should and when required on a number of these items. There are a number of things we can do in an emergency situation already. If the chief, for instance, needed to procure an item and we're in the midst of a fire, he's going to procure an item with or without the delegated authority bylaw, and we report back to council on such things. There's a number of things in the day-to-day functioning of the organization that we already do. This adds a much more procedural element to it, so that council officially grants us that sort of delegated authority. It does put a lot of onus, responsibility, and trust in the EOC management team, and specifically the CAO role as it's laid out in this delegated authority bylaw. I can go through some of the various elements of it. Probably better to answer any questions or concerns council may have. But again, I do want to emphasize that there is a reporting back, there is an updating to council, and to highlight that really there's a number of things that are stipulated here that this bylaw, even the way it's written in an emergency, still does not allow to be delegated. And you'll see on page 4 of 6, section 23.3 of the Municipal Act highlights a number of things which we cannot do, which I cannot do with or without this delegated authority bylaw. So I think it's important to highlight any of those things cannot occur. This is really, in a lot of ways, for the procurement of immediate needs in the event of an emergency. Right now, we are functioning in somewhat of a hybrid model. Core services are still running. We're still burying people. We're still issuing permits as required on things around health and safety. We are still doing things around immediate road needs. We are still testing water, all the things that are essential services. Again, this is simply for us to be able to respond fluidly, to be able to respond as quickly as possible in the event that situation and this situation becomes more worse than it already is. So through you, Madam Mayor, again, happy to answer some questions that council may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. CAO. And again, if anyone has any questions, please put your hand up and I'll create a list. There being none, Madam Clerk. Councillor McPherson. Councillor McPherson? He doesn't seem to be able to hear me. Yes.
Councillor McPherson on the phone, do you have any questions?
Councillor Timmers, why don't you come to the podium and the clerk will, is there anyone else while I'm making this list? Councillor Mikulik? Go ahead, Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. Firstly, I would just like to thank our CAO, our mayor, our fire chief, Ms. Beatty, and the entire EOC team for their work that they've been doing this past week, their dedication and commitment to the safety of our community. And this, to me, is the next step, and I fully support it. We need to have everything in place so that decisions can be made quickly. And I have only one question, and it is just regarding the reporting back. The CAO mentioned that. If you could just elaborate on that, please, Mike.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm going to let Julie, I think, start the response back, and then I'll have some additional questions. But I think overarching, Councillor, we'll be reporting back on a fairly frequent basis from an electronic standpoint. So as has been the practice, I think with every decision we made, from closing town hall to amending service delivery, I've emailed council first, advised you that those were things that we were considering waited a defined period of time to hear back from as many counselors as possible before making those decisions. So my goal is to continue in that same approach, that same methodology in terms of informing council if there are any new emerging issues that arise and anything we need to do. There is more of an official reporting back that's highlighted in the report, and I think we can determine, pending future legislation that's coming around, how do we do that recovery phase of this and the months potentially that this will take us to recover from. We will, again, I'm in council's hands. If you want more frequent reporting, we can ensure that we do that. Madam Clerk may have a suggestion on the frequency of that reporting.
Very good, thank you. Thank you
Is
very
that,
much.
is that satisfactory,
Very
Counselor?
much so, yes,
All
I
right,
just,
Then, Madam Clerk, would you describe what the normal reporting mechanism is, as Mr. CEO suggested?
So under the delegated authority, it's laid out in the report that any kind of authority enacted by the CAO, we would be summarizing, and it would be in a summarized report back to council as soon as possible, and to ensure that you're made aware and that it's accountable and transparent to the community for sure.
very good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam.
And Madam Clerk, just as an addition to that, now that we have passed the bylaw around the electronic meeting, if necessary, we could ratify without any really much delay at all.
That's right. There is still some questions, as it does look like there is quorum and it does count to that. I'm still clarifying with the province what that means in terms of voting. And so that's just something that is, I just need to get that clarified before we can move forward with any kind of electronic meetings. So as soon as I have that, we will.
However, since we've passed this bylaw tonight, there will be no delay for us.
No. No
Okay,
delay.
thank you. Mr. CAO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I mean, if it gives council some, I think, confidence, some comfort, things that are necessary and urgent, but they can wait a day or two so we can determine quorum, an ability for you to call in, and how all of that happens, will still happen by council decision. I don't want council to assume that by giving this delegated authority, we're just going to run roughshod, we're just going to go out and start purchasing things. This really is, if we find ourselves in a response mode, which requires real-time, immediate decisions. Typically what I've done is tried to reach out to the mayor, had a conversation with her before that happens as well. The deputy mayor when possible. Last night was an instance where we tried, but the councillor was dealing with a family member that had been injured. So that has typically been my approach, notwithstanding any sort of delegated authority. If things can wait a day or two, we're gonna have a virtual meeting. We're gonna take you through it. We'll work through the logistics of it. If we are on the ground, and I'm advised by the chief or any other members of our operations team, we're out of X, we're out of Y, we need to provide this, we need to provide that. That's really what this is meant to address, a real-time response in an emergency situation. And so I do want council to feel that comfort, have that trust that that's really what we're talking about. It is not just a kind of carte blanche, let's go start purchasing things. This is about response. When we get into that recovery phase of this, council's involved in every purchase, every decision, every stimulus program that we're going to apply to, all of that sort of stuff that happens. So I want to echo that comment, and I hope that gives council some semblance of comfort. And the process that I've taken to date has always been one that is collaborative and reaches out. Whether it states it in all of these procedural bylaws or not, I'm constantly updating both the mayor, all members of council, but in an immediate decision, usually reaching out to the deputy mayor and the mayor.
Thank you very much. I now have Councillor Mikulik. Councillor Mikulik, would you come forward, please? And then we have Councillor McPherson. Okay.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And I'd like to thank staff throughout this whole process and ordeal that we've been faced with. Rather unexpectedly, it came somewhat with warning, but for the most part, the impact or the severity of it has been increasing ever so quickly during hour by hour. I feel we have strong leadership. I feel very comfortable, and I feel very confident with the senior staff that we do have. And I think that we're fortunate as a municipality the size that we are to have the talent that we have within it. That being said, it's an interesting time that we're going through, and speaking with citizens in their 80s. They've never experienced anything like this, and I can't recall anything like this. The only thing similar is perhaps 9/11, but even this is going to have even more negative side effects or possible challenges that we face as a municipality down the road. So being such a fluid, being such a ever evolving situation, and with the potential decisions that might have to be made in the heat of the moment or in an immediate fashion, some of these decisions might be of significant nature. Is there any consideration, should we, and it might be a lot to ask for an individual in consultation with the mayor. The fear I have, or the concern I might have, is that should there be a difference of opinion with the two, and I think the CAO alluded to it a little bit earlier in his response, that should there be a consideration of possibly having 3 members, like the mayor in conjunction with the CAO in conjunction with the mayor, as well as perhaps the deputy mayor or an available councillor, just in case there's a situation where one may not agree with the other, and there may be the possibility of a majority rule sort of decision, especially if there's a serious decision to be made that requires an immediate one.
I don't see that happening, Councillor, and I say that because of the amount of planning that has gone on within the town in terms of the direction that we're going. These are not extraordinary decisions, they are extra decisions. And so I've already taken the precaution of involving, having conversations with Deputy Mayor John Pachariva, as well as the next Deputy Mayor, who is Councillor McPherson. And the conversation that I had with them is really around, if one of us becomes ill, if I become ill, then we need Councillor Pachariva at the ready. If for some reason or other he becomes ill, we have Councillor McPherson at the ready. And I'm not sure who the person is that comes after that, but if this continues on, we will absorb another person so that there are always 3 of us in order for those consultations to take place. I think that decisions that were going to be made are not going to be so far beyond the reach of the way our logic works. And therefore, I'm not concerned about those situations. But I think your points are worth noting, and I think that we have a plan in place in order to not only cover off any illnesses that could very well occur, but also those situations where there isn't agreement. I can't remember any occasion where the CAO and I had a decision to make where we disagreed on absolutely every element of it. We generally start within the middle somewhere and start working out. We just haven't had those situations. Now, I'm not asking anybody to accept that as the absolute answer to the question, but it is my role, it is the responsibility of the CAO to find solutions that are in the best interests of the community, not in the best interests of our ego. So that is how we will be proceeding.
I mean, I do appreciate that. It's just, as I've stated earlier, this is not ever-evolving, unknown pandemic that we're facing, where, you know, decisions that have been made in the past. I mean, when I hear stories about what's happening in Europe currently, there's some extremely difficult decisions being made. And, I just want to make sure that, there's no sense of regret, which there shouldn't be. You should never regret a decision that you've made, because the worst thing you could do is not make a decision. So I just want to make sure that should a difficult decision have to be made as a municipality, that we have a way of coming up with a unified decision. We've been fortunate in the past, as you've mentioned, with our with your decision-making process with the CAO, and that gives me confidence. And I'm delighted to hear that.
We're well protected, Councillor, by the Municipal Act, and as long as we operate within the parameters of the Act, I think that everything else will fall in place as it usually does. Thank you very much.
And I have one more question with regards to, forgive me, I couldn't find it in our bylaws, or I couldn't find it in our delegation of authority chain of command. A question I have is with regards to our CAO and the chain of command, and the determination of should our CAO, who will be possibly given delegation of authority, should he fall ill, unable to make decisions, who would be next? How is that determined? Is it a standard procedure that we have within the town as far as chain of command, or is it a delegated individual that the CAO chooses at the time at his discretion?
Okay, I'll ask the CAO to respond.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor and to all of council. I think if we find ourselves in that situation, and you'll see in the report a couple of other positions that the CAO does not have the ability to move around, for lack of a better word. And I highlight those as the clerk, the treasurer, auditor, and integrity commissioner. Those are all roles that are essential in order to maintain continuity. But I think specifically to the councillor's question, should I find myself in a position where I have to self-isolate and I'm not here, and I'll answer it in a couple of phases. I'd probably be working from home in that capacity, still be in touch with what's going on, and I think virtually work with the EOC team that is present and on the ground. Chief Hudson is our Chief Emergency Management Coordinator. Again, another one of those legislative responsibilities that we need to name as a municipality to respond to emergencies. And so I would continue working in that fashion and continue updating council and functioning really the same way, but far more virtually than I am versus being in the office. Should something happen that's a little more serious and I fall ill and I'm unable to make those decisions, again, I think I would leave that within the hands of the mayor, the deputy mayor, and the preceding deputy mayor, who have become almost a small caucus of council that the mayor is dealing with to determine who do you want to appoint on an interim basis if I fall ill and I'm off for a longer period of time. You have at your discretion the EOC management team. I encourage you to rely on them extensively if we find ourselves there. Chief Hudson, again, you have the treasurer and the clerk, which are roles that can assist members of council. But I would encourage you to rely on that management team, that EOC structure that's in place. They have supported me for the last week and a half and have done yeoman's work, again, working around the clock really to monitor every single issue potentially. We are leading also, and I'll echo this, a lot of municipalities in the region are reaching out, both from a communication support and emergency management support. I sat in on calls with the emergency management coordinators, with public health. There is, for a lot of people, there's a newness to dealing with an emergency like this. There's a lot of people around our table that have some of that experience. So Lincoln is leading. Take solace in that. You have a phenomenal EOC management team in place. So should something happen to your CAO in this particular case, you are more than covered. And again, I would suggest that that decision will fall in terms of who you name in an acting capacity to the mayor and and all of council, but that smaller caucus, I think, of the mayor, deputy mayor, and Councillor McPherson as the incoming deputy mayor, to make that decision or bring a recommendation back to you collectively on that.
And Counselor, I would suggest that I already know if the situation in regard to the CAO was a precipitous event, I already know who that person is that he would recommend be the acting, and I would have that discussion with the deputy mayor, and then we would go forward utilizing the expertise of the EOC to advise that individual, just as they have been advising and supporting the CAO.
And 2 weeks ago, I never thought in a million years that I'd be asking these questions that I'm asking right now. And they're loaded questions, they're heavy questions, and they're probably the two toughest questions I've had to ask since taking on this role of counselor. And if any member of staff or if any member of council or any member of the community is taking these questions the wrong way, it's only because I personally am a fella that likes to have my T's crossed and my I's dotted, and I like to worry about worst case scenarios, having them in place, hoping that we don't have to go down that route. So those are my two questions with regards to this. And again, I'm proud of the work that our team has done to date. And, we're in for some challenging times, and I have no doubt that we're going to pull through this even stronger than we were before. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillors, I would say that our goals are not unique to our situation here. I don't find these questions loaded at all. I think this is what professionals do. You all have your own jobs where you have to conduct yourself as professionals. And so responding to these questions and being able to lay out what the plan is part of the day-to-day work that we have now. It may be a little tighter in terms of the information and the frequency of the information, but it is the day-to-day work of our corporation, and I'm also very proud of the work that has been done. All right, there are no other questions, and I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers and seconded by Councillor Brunet. Madam Clerk, is there any water at all? I just need a bit. All right, I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers, seconded by Councillor Brunet, that until the end of the COVID-19 novel coronavirus pandemic, as declared by Health Canada, or June 30th, 2020, whichever is earlier, and where council or its appointed committees fail to meet the quorum requirements under Section 237 of the Municipal Act 2001, the Chief Administrative Officer be delegated authority to exercise the following actions. Number 1, the disposition of any real or personal property of the municipality. 2, making any expenditures or incurring any other liability. 3, the appointment or removal from office of any officer of the municipality excluding those set out in Section 23.311 of the Municipal Act. That the CAO and clerk be authorized to execute such agreements, instruments, conveyances, and other related documents necessary to give effect to the transactions authorized by the CAO under the delegated authority approved until the end of the COVID-19 novel coronavirus pandemic or June 30th, 2020, whichever is earlier. That the CAO be delegated authority to exercise any discretionary corporate actions in response to unforeseen circumstances that arise due to the COVID-19 novel coronavirus pandemic, and to exercise delegated authority where such authority has not already been provided by council until the end of the COVID-19 novel coronavirus pandemic or June 30th, 2020, whichever is earlier. The Council of the Corporation of the Town of Lincoln authorized the CAO to take such action as he, in consultation with the mayor, may deem necessary and appropriate in order to deal with any emerging issues arising from the corona COVID-19 outbreak in order to protect the public interest, and that the CAO report back when it is practicable to do so in order to have council ratify any matters that may require its formal approval. Are there any questions to the motion? Your pleasure on the motion. There are none opposed. The motion is carried. Madam Clerk? Thank you. I can't read this. I have a motion moved by Councillor Mikulik, seconded by Councillor Russell, that leave be given to introduce bylaw number 2020-14, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held Thursday, March 19th, 2020, being read a first, second, and third time, that bylaw number 2020-14 be enacted and passed, and that the mayor and clerk sign and seal the said bylaw. Pleasure on the motion. The motion is carried. None opposed. I have a motion moved by Councillor Russell, seconded by Councillor Rinjima, that special council on March 19th, 2020 be adjourned. Your pleasure on the motion? None opposed. The motion is carried. Councillors, I want to thank all of you for coming in this evening and carrying out this important work that will now require staff to go forward in a very reliable and well-planned fashion. I want to thank all the staff that have been involved over this past week, making sure that we have had the best material available to us in order to consider these bylaws that we have this evening. Mr. CAO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I could just make some comments, and then council can get on with their way. I know a couple are packing up, and we promised we wouldn't keep you here too long. One of the things that I said to the senior leadership team around the table is we have a responsibility to provide leadership, to maintain calmness, I think to try to put people's mind at ease. There is a huge amount of anxiety that we're hearing out there. A number of our senior staff, frontline staff are feeling it. Councillors are feeling it. All of us, I think, are feeling it. And I only say that not because I know something, not because I'm hearing something from public health that's any different than what you're hearing, but just in observing what's going on out there and around us. There will be many elements of this, a recovery element, a business element. I've reached out today to a number of our local business owners, institutions, Some are trying to find small ways to contribute. I think council has a huge role to play in maintaining that calmness, providing the leadership that you already do, but I think you'll be relied on even more to do that. So I thank council for your continued faith in all of us. As I've said in every one of my emails, stay well, and I will continue to update council as frequently and as regularly as humanly possible.
Thank you very much, Mr. CAO. Councillor Renchie. You realize that the meeting has been adjourned.
Yes, I want to comment. I want to thank also the ongoing, thank staff and the CAO and the mayor for the ongoing communication that's been endless and complete. And I also want to thank the clerk's department and staff for organizing this meeting such that we are practicing social distancing. It's the right thing to do, and we're setting a very good example for people out there that are struggling right now. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. All right, thank you everyone for coming.